Check, check. Okay, here we go. Hello and welcome to the show. Tonight I'm going to be talking about my photography. It's a hobby that I've been doing for a while, and I've actually collected a fair amount of different cameras and lenses. I've tried a number of lenses, and I have some different types of cameras. And I'm just going to talk about sort of the timeline from when I first started taking pictures until now, and the different trends and fads that I've gone through where I've taken pictures of this or that, but just some different stories about some of the places I've been and the photos that I've taken. Some photos are really important to me, and I think photography has been important to me because it allows me to sort of put bookmarks in my life so I can look back at a photo and remember the things I was doing around that time. If I just angle the computer down here, these are some of the cameras I'm going to be talking about, the gear that I currently have. So all of these different things will come into the story eventually, and you'll be able to hear about them. So, okay, if we're starting from the beginning, I think a good place to look would be in middle school, taking pictures on photo booth using my mom's computer. So as you can see, this is one of those pop art filters. One of the many options that's in the old photo booth app. But yeah, just taking some of these, and they're a little embarrassing, absolutely. I think in this photo I was probably trying to look like Jay-Z, the rapper, maybe on an album cover or something like that I saw online somewhere. But yeah, they're definitely embarrassing. And but it is, if I'm being completely honest about this journey with photography, I think this is the place to start. So. But let's move on. We don't want to look at this too long. So then we move on to, I'm in middle school. When I was in middle school, Instagram started to become popular. And I got an iPod eventually. And so, yeah, just taking different photos of my friends on the basketball court, as you can see in this one. And then the mirror selfie had to happen eventually. And so you can see that iPod is totally trashed. It's covered with stickers. I soon grew out of it, and I moved on to my next big trend, which was taking sunset photographs. I was using my dad's camera. It was a Canon G15. It's a point-and-shoot camera. And yeah, for a winter season, I was really into taking sunset pictures where there'd be snow or an icicle in the foreground, and there would be a cool reflection or something like that. I was really into that. That's all I can say. On Instagram, I used to have a hashtag that I would try to maintain, which was called McDougal Sunset Shots. So I kind of, at the time, took sunsets to be like that was my genre that I was trying to specialize in. Another camera, so I'm going to talk about this camera right now, but the GoPro also played a role in, growing up, trying to figure out what sort of photography I liked. Because I like snowboarding, this camera, the GoPro, was really popular around that time. They were doing a lot of marketing. So I got my hands, I think, on a GoPro, the first GoPro, and then eventually I got this, which is the Hero 2. So at this point, I think they're up to 7. As you can see, it's got this waterproof case on it. And so I like to take photos at the beach where I know the camera is going to get sandy or whatever. So I'll bring this. Or once I went out in the field with our dog and threw the camera around in the snow and got some fun shots with that. And for a while, when I was snowboarding, I'd mount it on my head. I think it was on my head, yeah. Probably looked absolutely crazy, but my friends and I all thought the GoPro was a really handy tool, and it was, and it still is for some people. And then in middle school, or maybe this was freshman year of high school, I got a DSLR camera from my mom for Christmas. She got me a Nikon D3200, and it was the first real, somewhat serious digital camera that I'd had. And I recently sold it, but I've been using it for something like 7 years. Yeah, so it was the D3200, and it came with an 18-55 kit lens. Really solid camera. And again, at first, I was really into the sunsets at the time. And looking back on it, these pictures are not terribly interesting. I don't think I'd want to look at these all day, but it was somewhere to start. And it was also when I first learned how to use Lightroom and Photoshop. Yeah, I was having a great time posting them to Instagram and feeling like I was getting a lot of attention. So to go on about the 18 to 55 lens, that's like a really standard lens that people start with. And I became interested in astrophotography, but the 18 to 55, it wasn't a very fast lens, and it was a little difficult to start out taking photos of the stars, where you have to have a long exposure and get a lot of light into the camera to really make it show up. So you can see in this picture, this is one of my first tries at trying to do astrophotography, and it's pretty grainy, and you can't really make out any larger shape of the stars, but you know, I was giving it a try, so I think it's a pretty decent effort. Another thing I got into was these sort of, I really don't know the term for this, but yeah, either snowboarding or, you know, some of my friends would go off a jump and I would hit the shutter and set it to rapid shutter speed and get these cool photos, and then later in Photoshop I could make it look like one cool image like that. And this is a photo of me doing a 540, which I did not land. It looks like I'm coming around, but no. At the end, I fell and slid for a little while, but yeah. And this is another one. This was in New Hampshire one summer, and that's my mom in the foreground. And I set up the camera, and I might have done either a 10-second timer, or I had like a remote button that I could press from a distance and set off the camera, but this is a photo I really like too. Moving on, as people who have owned digital DSLR cameras know, there's a bit of a, what do you call it, like a culture about buying lenses and upgrading your lenses and getting professional, you know, better glass, whatever, cool lenses. And eventually, I felt like the 18 to 55 just wasn't cutting it for some of the things, at least, that I wanted to do. So I got a 50mm 1.8 prime lens. The reason I got the lens was that with the 1.8 really fast aperture, the f-stop, I wanted to be able to take pictures of the stars, and I thought that would be really useful to get a lot of light into the camera with this faster lens, which is partly true. I ended up taking some photos of the stars, but 50mm is just not a very wide focal length. For astrophotography, you want a wide angle lens that's also pretty fast, and I could only settle for one of those, so I got the 50mm. And as you can see in this photo, this is basically the quintessential 50mm picture. It has the bokeh effect where everything is really blurry in the background, and I thought it was really cool at the time. But again, looking back, I can see all these things are like sort of cliche photos in a way. But anyway, I took some photos of you know, our pet. That's our cat Stripe, and it was a great lens. It focused really quickly, and you know, it made for some really sharp images, which I liked. And then recently, along with the D3200, I sold the 50mm, but it was a great lens. But you know, at a certain point, I think I wanted to try a wider lens that I could shoot the stars with. I had this grand notion that, you know, you got a really wide lens with a fast aperture, you'd be able to get these amazing night sky pictures. I went on a hiking trip. This is my freshman summer in high school, and I went on a hiking trip in New Hampshire with some other teenagers, as you can see, and I brought my camera along. This is a 10-day hiking trip in New Hampshire, and so I brought my camera, and when I think back on it, now that I've done some more backpacking, bringing a camera and a heavy lens is really a burden when you're hiking, especially for 10 days. But at the time, I didn't really think about it too much. And I bought a new lens, which is called the Rokinon 14mm 3.1 Cine lens. So this particular lens is really bizarre, especially on the D3200. And the lens is so wide, so the front of it is all glass, and I'm not even sure you're able to put a filter on it, so you basically have to trust yourself that you're not going to screw up the glass and scratch it. It's very heavy, it's manual focus, and I was able to use it a week before the trip, and I was actually able to get some pictures of the stars with it. And so on this hike with the other teenagers, at a certain point we stopped at a waterfall. So in these photos you can see I took some long exposure photos of the water. It looks really nice and silky and glossy, and I like this photo actually. And I was trying to be very, very careful with this lens because I just recently got it. It was fairly expensive, and you know, it had this big glass front to it, so it looked really fancy too. And I had all sorts of bags. It was probably like in a bag, in a bag, in a bag, 3 bags up in my backpack. I guess our counselor said, okay, let's pack it up and let's keep hiking. So I took the lens off the camera, I set it down on the rock, and I turned my back on it to put my camera away in my bag. And all of a sudden I hear it sort of skipping down the rock and a sliding sound. All of a sudden this brand new lens that I just got falls down like a set of stairs, one rock to the next rock, making some terrible smashing noises, and then falls right into the river and gets washed away into oblivion. And that was how I lost my 14mm lens. And to be perfectly honest, this was probably day 2 of the hiking trip. So it wasn't as though I had, you know, a lot of time with the lens anyway. So that might have taught me a lesson about being careful with lenses, and you know, they can, if you drop them in rivers, they tend to break. After the trip, after this hiking trip, I got a new camera, which I can show you right here. So I had the D3200, and I got this camera, which is the D7100. And one thing about the D7100 is that it's part of a series of Nikon cameras that are able to focus even with D-series lenses. So the D3200 was limited because it could only autofocus with G-series lenses, which are newer. The G ones, it stands for some random shit. There's so many acronyms and letters that stand for different things on Nikon lenses, but the point is, the D7100 could autofocus on a whole older selection of lenses. I wanted to get another lens, a wider lens. Again, you're always on the search for a wide lens with a fast aperture, so I tried getting this lens, which is the 35 to 70 2.8D lens. And this one I got for a trip that my aunt and I took to Alberta. It was a great trip, and I got a lot of good photos, and a lot of good photos with this particular lens, but it wasn't focusing very well on my camera. Yeah, for me at least, that one didn't really work out so well. But I got another lens in high school, which is the 24 to 120D lens, another Nikon lens. And this one worked pretty well for me. I only got it for, I think, $50 on eBay, and I recently sold it for $45. I got some good photos with it. This photo is, I was driving on the way to a baseball game at my high school, I think in May it says, so during the spring, and this tree was in full bloom in Waterbury. And I like this photo. I actually submitted it to a photo show at the University of Toronto, at my university, and got recognized for it. I think I got honorable mention, something like that. So this photo is from this summer. That's me doing the flip, and yeah, my dad took the picture. Anyway, I thought it was a pretty good lens. But now, okay, all along, I've also had my iPhone, you know, whatever phone or thing that I was using, they usually have cameras on them nowadays, and so that was always an option for random photos that I could take. So this particular photo I took, I was in high school, and this was at tennis practice. And at this time of the year, it was late winter, and so we were practicing tennis indoors. And I think a drunk driver went off the road. This is at Sugarbush, and hit this telephone pole, which made all the lights on the tennis court go out. So we were stuck in the dark, and the whole tennis practice got canceled because of this guy. And yeah, you can see these firemen sort of standing around, befuddled that some guy managed to crash on a flat, empty road, but it happens, I guess. Sometimes you can really capture magic with iPhone photos. This is it's droplets of water on a car's sunroof in my high school parking lot. Someone had a Tesla. I don't know why Tesla sunroofs do this. The iPhone that I currently have is an iPhone 5, so it's not as though I have some sort of fancy phone. And but I've gotten photos that I like over the years. And there's some other photographers as well, like Jerry Sue, the skateboarder. I think he published a book that's just like smartphone pictures. A few people have done that before. This is kind of a continuation of the photos that I would take in middle school for Instagram. So these ones are just using my phone, and again, even though the phones I've had are really old, I've had for a long time I just used the iPhone 5C, which was basically made out of plastic, and whatever, it worked for me. But even on those you can get some cool photos like this one. This was recently, I think it was last Christmas. There was a bonfire outside at my uncle's house, and someone threw a log on the fire, and the iPhone, it basically just has one button. So I pressed the button, and this is what came of it. So when I was a sophomore in high school, I spent a semester in France. And when I went to France, film photography was something that sort of came onto my radar. Film photography was, I guess, becoming a little bit trendy. These days it's extremely trendy, and people are experimenting with film and what have you. But the point is, when I went to France, I started taking some film photography for the first time. So for Christmas, my Uncle David gave me a film camera. He had some old Pentax screw mount cameras, and he also gave me 3 lenses. This is a 28 millimeter, they're all prime lenses, but 28 millimeter, 55 millimeter 1.8, and then a 105 millimeter 2.8. And unfortunately, his cameras were, I think, pretty corroded. There was something very wrong with them, so I ended up trading them in and getting this camera right here. This is a Pentax Spotmatic. As far as the features on the camera, it's got a dial on the top, and this is for the shutter speed. And so you can change the shutter speed here. You have the shutter itself, and then the crank where you advance the film with your finger. For a little while, the light meter would work, so I would pick the shutter speed that I wanted, and then I would shift to a certain aperture and look through the camera. And on the right side, there's a little dial that shows if it's too dark or too bright. But again, that stopped working pretty soon. So for a little while, I would just guess what I thought was right, and I think it turned out to be fine. And then I got a light meter app on my phone. So again, yeah, this camera is really simple. The lenses just sort of screw off like light bulbs on the front. And once they screw off, you can basically see right into the mirror on the inside, which goes up to the viewfinder. And then when you click the shutter, it has a very satisfying click. And it's all manual. There's no battery that tells it to do this or that. And it's really an impressive piece of technology that I love to use. And I've taken many photos with it, many rolls of film. And as you can see, I painted some lines across it to make it look fancy, to make it look my own. While I was in France, I did that. And I ended up spilling paint on my host family's table, outside at least. But anyway, they made me sand and restain the whole table. So I think that this is probably the first photo that I took with this camera. I got some rolls of film from, luckily, there was a photo store in the town that I was living in, and there was a really small ski hill, as well. So I got to go to the ski hill one day during winter and took some photos around there. So this is a photo that was taken from my house in France, aiming towards the town. And I would go all around the town taking photos of different people, different French cars. I liked looking at the different cars that they had, or, you know, the different seasons. I got to see winter and spring go into summer. So there was a lot of trees blooming with their leaves. I got to take pictures of that too. Speaking of the trees blooming in France, here's a larger framed picture. And this is one of my favorite pictures, actually. That's me in the picture. I kind of like to sneak into my pictures when I can. And I didn't even have a tripod, actually. I just asked a stranger. Like, I set up all the settings and focused the camera. And I just said, you know, press on this shutter button. And I just handed it off to a stranger who took the picture for me. But yeah, this is one of my favorite pictures. Okay, so here's one of the early sort of portrait pictures that I took. This guy was just walking down the street in France, and I thought he had an incredible corduroy jacket that sort of matched with his pants and his hat. So anyway, so this is, again, one of the first portraits that I took, and portraiture turns out to be something I really like doing. I like the experience of talking to people, and sometimes the challenge is just taking their picture in the first place, but talking to people, and it's sort of a collaborative effort, I find, when you're taking portraits. So here's a picture, a framed picture of that same picture from France, and I entered this photo into a competition at Norwich University and got a prize for it. So yeah, this one I really like. And these are some of the first photos that I actually framed and printed out, and I learned how to cut these mats, and so that was a fun process. And okay, so here's the first black and white roll of photo that I took on Ilford HP5. That's the name of the 35mm film. And self-portraits. I've taken a number of self-portraits too with this camera. So here's proof that this is the same camera I've been using, you can see. And this is a photo that I took just wandering around the town. And of course there's a lot of cats in this particular French village. And I was pretty impressed with this photo because, first of all, a cat yawning is such a brief amount of time. You know, this camera, it's all manual, so you really have to do all the settings before you can take a photo that looks half decent. And just by chance, I was able to really get the focus sharp on this cat yawning. Anyway, this photo really got me excited about film photography, and I was really into it. This is absolutely one that I posted on Instagram. Felt cool about. And like I said, so the self-portrait trend continues. And this is a photo from Stowe Mountain in Vermont. And yeah, with my dog Yoshi and I, we hiked up the mountain and took our photo in the reflection of the window. But this is one of my favorite photos, actually. So after taking film photos in France with this camera, I came back to Vermont for the summer and got to take some photos of my friends. This is my friend Wyatt at the Waterbury Reservoir, at Elephant Rock, and on the rope swing. These photos too, I recently unearthed them, but I got them printed out on these pieces of foam core. And for a long time, this photo was actually at Jim's Pizza in Waterbury, a local pizza shop. And so I think it got like, I don't know, like a little greasy or something while it was there, but I recently recovered them. And yeah, so for a while you could have gone into Jim's Pizza Shop and seen my photos hanging up on the wall. So yeah, so during that summer, I took a bunch of different pictures around town. This is at the Burlington Skate Park. One of my neighbors, Asa Moskowitz, is a great skateboarder, so I took a photo of him. And this photo came out pretty well, and again got printed onto this piece of foam core. And one last photo, this is at Stowe, a picture of our dog, Yoshi. So later on, I took some more portraits. So this is a portrait of a guy that I met in Florida who had a shoe store, and a bunch of records that he was selling as well. Later on, I went to Toronto. This was the first time I went to Toronto. I went to visit my friend and also to see the University of Toronto, where I go now. And so I, of course, brought my camera with me. This was a fantastic day. I was skateboarding around, looking at the city, taking pictures of things that I liked. And this particular photo was shot on E6 slide film, which it's supposed to have more vibrant colors, I guess. These colors came out a little bit weird in this picture. But anyway, I went all around the city taking photos of different things, and I like this photo quite a bit. And then this photo is also from Toronto. This is just a guy walking with his cat in a bag. Nothing much to say about that. Moving on. So once when I was at Lizotte Camera in Burlington, they had a free bin of old cameras that may or may not have been working, probably not working. And I came across this camera. This is called the Olympus Stylus Epic. Zoom 80 Deluxe, apparently. I found the proper battery to... I didn't know if it worked, really, but I found the battery that matched it. And lo and behold, it still works. It's great. It shoots 35mm film. You just put it right in the back there. And I had a lot of fun with this camera. It's got a zoom range of 38 to 80 millimeters. And it works pretty well. As you can see in that photo that's up on screen, this is another photo from Alberta shot on this camera right here. You can see actually behind me over there, that same picture is printed out really big. And with this camera, because it's so small, it's called a clamshell camera, and it's kind of the perfect thing to have if you're going to like a farmer's market, for example. So at this time in my life, I got really interested in going to the farmer's market and potentially buying stuff, but mostly just talking to people, especially the people selling, because the people who sell at this farmer's market in Waterbury have all sorts of weird stuff. Like, as you can see, this is my friend Isaiah holding some gigantic sword. It looks like the sword is just about as tall as he is, with a skull and something crazy on it. I don't know. Yeah, it's just a really fun camera. You pull it right out of your pocket, and it does that cool thing where the lens pops out on its own. Really cool. And yeah, so I really like the photo of this kid who's so proud with his gigantic Mega Mastodon Nerf gun. One time I was at the flea market and I saw this couple and they were selling records, and at the time I was very interested in buying records. So I talked to them for a little while. They got all their records when a certain radio station went. They did maybe the station went out of business, or maybe it was just switching over to digital, but basically it sold them like thousands of records for not very much money, I guess. So this couple decided it would be fun to go to flea markets around the state and try to sell off all the records that they had gotten. His hat says 5 generations, so I asked him about it, and I guess their family has 5 generations, maybe all living in Vermont, or at the very least the 5 generations of the family are still in contact. And they also gave me their address, which I wrote down on a sticky note. So after I took this picture, first of all, I made sure that they were holding the most raunchy and sexy and appropriate record that I could possibly find, which of course I bought. It's in my collection now. But anyway, I took this photo on this little Olympus camera, and I had it printed out, and I printed it at my school's photo lab onto canvas, and I wrapped it up. I ended up wrapping up the canvas and mailing it to the mailing address that I had, and a few months later, the guy must have received it, because he called me back and said, you know, he was glad, he was really thankful that I sent it to him, and that his wife was in the hospital for something unfortunate related to old age, and he was really happy that I had this fun photo, this fun memory to send about the summer. So this is the summer of 2018. I was driving with a friend in Burlington, and I saw this guy on the side of the road. He was walking, and I could just tell he looked amazing, even from the car as I was driving by. He had this cool sort of straw hat on with the two crutches that he was walking with and a pipe in his mouth. I mean, he looks like some sort of rockabilly Santa Claus or something like that. So I stopped the car, pulled over, got out, and went over and took this guy's picture on this little camera. And this picture actually I printed out really big as well. It's in my room. And I just love it. I just love how this camera is so handy. You can take it right out of your pocket and take people's picture with it. So this was a really fantastic day skiing with Bill Minter and Eric's and the Goodman family, Sue and Dave. And my mom is there on the left. And I took the picture, so I'm not in it. But yeah, I guess I snowboarded the whole day with this thing in my pocket. You know, you don't really notice it because it's so light. And then it was just the perfect thing to take out and take a picture. Of course, if I tried to use my phone would have probably died because it's so sensitive to the cold. This is one of my favorite photos. This was taken behind Thatcher Brook, I believe, with this same camera. And yeah, so this was taken in town behind Thatcher Brook. And I just think this girl, you can't see her face, but you can see her eyes, and you can see that her eyes are smiling. I really like this one. This is like ultimate Vermont summer for me. Those guys are having fun. So at some point while I was in high school, my mom said that she had been looking through one of the drawers that she has in her room, and she came across an old camera, which was this camera. And she said it had been sitting, you know, at the foot of their bed in this drawer under some clothes and blankets for a long time. And so this is called the Pentax IQ Zoom Easy Y. It looks a little bit like a disposable camera. It's a little bit heavier, more sturdy, but it's incredibly simple. It has a self-timer, a flash. So my mom comes to me and asked if I wanted to use this camera, which I did. I noticed that there was still a roll of film in the camera. So I opened it up, and I had this roll of film developed. And it turned out that when I was 3 or 4 years old, my mom had shot this roll of film of me, of her friends hiking of Vermont. And so basically the first thing I did was send off this old film to be developed. And I ended up finding a roll full of ancient photos from my childhood that had never been seen. So yeah, so I got to see photos like this one of myself probably 4 years old. You can see our old car in the background. This is in Waitsfield, Vermont, at a little farm shack that sells corn and things like that. Yeah, and this old photo I actually used for my senior yearbook. This was like the child photo that I had to include, but it was so cool because it came right out of this camera. Here's a photo of my mom that was on the camera. That's my mom, Belle. Here's a photo taken in Toronto at a Raptors game that I went to. And it was really fun being able to see these old photos of myself that were taken with this camera, and then putting another roll of film in it and continuing on taking photos of the things that I wanted to take pictures of. As you can see in this photo here, so this is in Toronto on Spadina Avenue. And for a school project, I interviewed the Spider-Man busker called Peter Parkour, who runs all around town and causes a ruckus. But anyway, I interviewed him for about an hour. I wrote a story for the Varsity newspaper, which is a newspaper at my university, and it got published. But apparently this guy is sort of notorious and controversial, so like a week after this story that I worked on got published in the newspaper, it got taken off their website because people were complaining about it, which is very fair, I think. So one last photo I'm going to talk about for this camera is actually beside me. It's a big framed photo, and it's of my dad and I driving in the car with our dog, whose name is Yoshi. And this photo, yeah, I took it with this camera, I believe. I'm pretty certain. Anyway, I just put it on the dashboard, set a timer, and was basically guaranteed that at some point our dog would reach over my shoulder and try to eat what I was eating. That's just the way she is, and it just happened to get this this photo. So, after I graduated from high school here in Vermont, I went off to work as a dishwasher in Alaska, and I had this grand, grand idea of Alaska, that there would be bald eagles and bears flying everywhere. The bears were not flying. The eagles were flying. So I knew that I wanted a telephoto lens, because I figured I was going to see some wildlife, and I wanted to get some close-up shots of whether it be fish or birds or bears, like I said. So I looked at a few different telephoto lenses. The 70 to 300, I think that's the range. 70 to 300 is a pretty popular Nikon lens. And then the part of the Nikon Holy Trinity, which is basically the flagship, the nicest lenses they have, includes a 70 to 200 2.8 lens that's really nice. And I actually tested one out, and I put one onto my camera, and it looked incredibly sexy and awesome, but that didn't end up working. But the lens I did get is right to my left. This is the Nikon 80 to 200 2.8D, and it's a very heavy, sturdy lens. It's a telephoto, but it's internal focusing, so it doesn't change its length when you're focusing, which is something I've come to really appreciate, because it makes the motion much smoother when you're filming video or photo or whatever it is. In Alaska, it was an incredible tool to have when I would have some time off from my job dishwashing. I would walk all around with the lens and carry it up mountains to shoot across the different peaks, and I would look down into the valley and take pictures of people that didn't know I was up there looking at them. And it's a lens that's sort of particular. You can't quite use it for everything. With its widest focal length being 80 millimeter, you really have to stand pretty far away from things to make it usable, but it's been a terrific lens, and I've really loved to use it. And I'll keep talking about it a little more, but let me start getting into this first photo. So this photo I took was one of the first photos I took using this lens, and it was my dad's birthday, and we went to my first and the only baseball game I've ever gone to, which was in Boston for the Red Sox. And I had such a good time using this lens, again, for like the first week that I had it. Yeah, so at Fenway Park, there was just so much to look at, so many different signs and people. The whole place was packed, because this was in 2019. And so you can see in this photo, I just zoomed in and got a picture. We weren't necessarily sitting very close either. But yeah, it felt like I was right there, and I could look at people in the crowd that were all the way on the other side. I could look at birds flying over, and it is just such a cool lens. This is, I think, my favorite lens that I've had, just in terms of the images it takes. It's really fast focusing on my D7100. It's really heavy. It looks just super impressive and professional in a sense, so it makes me feel cool when I'm using it. And this photo I took very recently. My parents and I went out to ice skate on Lake Champlain in Vermont. And at first I just wanted to skate, so I left the lens and my camera in the car. But later on I thought it was just the perfect time to use it, so I went back to the car and got my lens. And this photo, you can see because the lens has such a long range, you can zoom in so far and everything kind of gets compressed, and it gives a certain feel to the photos. This photo demonstrates pretty well what this lens is capable of in terms of shooting people that are really, really far away, and the different effects that you can achieve with it. And then this photo, so like I said, I went to Alaska after I graduated high school just for the summer. And I was really planning on taking a picture of an eagle. I thought a bald eagle would be an incredibly patriotic thing to take a picture of. And I ended up seeing a few eagles, but only on 2 occasions did I get to take their picture. Did they let me take their picture? One of them, my friend and I got up really early. His name is Tanner. We got up really early and we went down to the beach. And on our way back to our cabins to start work for the day, there was an eagle up in a tree. So I got a picture, but only with my iPhone, and it was still pretty cool. Maybe I'll be able to find that and put that up on screen. But this photo that you're looking at, and some of the ones to come, I saw this eagle up in the tree, big bird, and I got into a kayak with my camera and my lens, probably around my neck or somewhere in the boat. And I slowly paddled out towards the bird. And at this point, I was really pretty far away. I assumed that I was fully zoomed in. I managed to get some sort of half-decent pictures of the bird. They're not totally sharp because you have to crop the photo in a little bit. And then as I got past a certain point, within like 100 feet of it, it noticed me and flew off. And I got a few pictures here too, but I think it just shows... this is what I was trying to do when I first purchased this lens. I think this thing has served me super well as far as bird photography, which is not something I'm really into. This is another photo I believe I took with this lens. I was able to ride in a float plane on a few occasions when I was in Alaska. And this is actually on Twin Lakes. The jagged mountains in the background just made this photo pretty incredible. And another thing I'll add is that while I was able to fly a few times on a few occasions in the float plane, mind you, I was only the dishwasher, so they didn't exactly give me a lot of privileges, but one of them was taking a few flights in the plane. And one really cool thing I was able to do is to shoot out of our plane to the other float plane that was trailing behind us. So I thought this photo was just a cool demonstration of the capabilities of the lens, and yeah, it's kind of unusual. Another thing that I really enjoyed doing, when I was living in Alaska, a lot of planes would fly overhead because that's a primary mode of transportation. I could seriously just point this up in the air and it would focus on the camera and I could get a shot and I could read, the numbers off the plane side, or I could see the captain's head in the cockpit. It was really cool, and I definitely did a few of those while I was in Alaska. So as I was getting interested in photography, I also sort of a parallel interest was getting interested in video and editing videos and learning to use various editing software. And so I figured I would be able to use this lens if I put it on a tripod, and I did. And in Alaska, I took videos of different planes, of just stationary videos. If I put it onto a tripod, I actually think because I got this lens, it sort of inspired a style of video making that I've adopted, which is just sort of it's sort of like a compilation. It's sort of like an observational compilation where I just set the camera up on a tripod in various spots, and it'll either be a series of time lapses or videos just sort of showing the environment. I've put a few videos like that up on my YouTube channel, and as you can see in this video, it's just a plane, one of the float planes coming in and landing on the water. And for a video that I made about Alaska, I stabilized it and put it in as one of the clips, but I thought it was really cool. I kind of felt like, I don't know, like a real news cameraman operating the camera of something at a distance. And I think I got some good videos with it. And once I got to Toronto, the lens had not yet fallen into a river. This is when I was in Alaska. That was a very real danger, is that I was going to destroy this lens somehow, which could easily have happened. But I didn't end up destroying it, and when I went off to university in Toronto, I brought it with me, And just by chance, basically, the first room that I lived in when I was going to school had an incredible view of the CN Tower. So some nights I would set up the camera and either take pictures of the moon or the CN Tower up close, because the CN Tower has lights all over it in different places, and every night they do sort of a different light show. It'll either change colors gradually, or the colors will be representative of some holiday, or it'll actually be flashing and showing different words. Or this photo is a little bit different because I don't think I meant to do this, but I guess it was a bit of a long exposure and I jolted the lens with my elbow, or I jolted the tripod with my elbow, and got this effect. And you can see the moon is in the top corner. I like to take pictures of that. This is a more recent video that I took with this lens. I actually shot this video I guess 3 days ago. It was this week. And that's our family friend, our neighbor Bill, who was just skiing down a hill. So I set up the camera on a tripod, and I was actually able to sort of move it and follow him as he went down the hill. But if anyone is looking for a telephoto lens, I would recommend it, but not this one, of course, because I'm going to keep it. It's one of the 2 lenses I use all the time. And lastly, we're going to get to the final lens that I recently got. It was actually the reason, this lens was the reason that I wanted to make this video in the first place. I realized that I've just gone through different various types of gear as I was experimenting with photography. So I've actually got to see, a number of different lenses and cameras, and I figured I should just talk about it. This is the last lens that I'm going to talk about. Right now it's fastened to my D7100 camera, but it's the 18-35 3545 G lens, Nikon lens, and it's very light. It's far lighter than this telephoto lens to my left. I got this lens primarily because the 24-120 lens that I used a lot for video, I sold. I wasn't so happy with the way it was focusing, and it was really heavy and not so easy to adjust the zoom on it. But this one has a fairly smooth zoom ring. I really just got it last week. I was planning to use it to film various videos this week because I'm on vacation. This lens so far, I've enjoyed it. I've taken some video with it, and as you can see, a photo here of our dog. This is one of the first sort of test images that I've taken with it. But so far I'm happy with the lens. That's pretty much it. I think I've gotten through all the cameras and lenses that I've used over the years. So at this point we're at the present, where I've gotten up to today. I recently got this new lens that I've been liking, and I hope to use it a lot more. I hope I don't throw it into any rivers by accident. Not really sure what I should say to conclude, but the process of collecting these cameras is really fun, and it's fun to talk with other people about them. And at this point I'm really satisfied with the D7100 camera that I have. I've got these 2 lenses for it, which pretty much covers the whole range of what I would ever want to do. And in the future, potentially I might sell this setup and get something for video if that's really what my interest is headed towards. But like I was mentioning, even these cameras I've had a fantastic time with, whether it be developing photos of myself when I was 4 years old that are stuck in the camera, or taking photos day to day when I was in high school. I had a really good time using these older cameras as well. So I hope it was enjoyable to watch for you, and I'm gonna keep taking photos wherever I am, and I really enjoy it. I'm not exactly sure where this hobby of photography is going to take me, but at this point I've got such a big library of photos to look back on and to remember various moments in my life, or different times that I threw cameras into a river, for example. I'm not really sure how to end this video.